Hey there, welcome to the REI Conversion Podcast, where each episode we discuss strategies and digital tools to help you launch, automate, and scale your real estate investing business. Learn how to run your investing business remotely, find out ways to automate your business to better utilize your time, and learn what other successful investors are implementing so you can get to the next step closer to your investing goals. And I'm your host and founder of REI Conversion, Jesse Kwong. Hey, how's it going? It's Jesse here from the REI Conversion Podcast. This episode, I've got Jaren from the REtipster.com blog. He is a land investor. He's done it all. He's done wholesaling. He's been part of other sites like Bigger Pockets and Simple Wholesaling. You may have seen him around before, but he's going to be joining me on this episode to talk about selling land through a real estate agent. Not only that, Jaren's going to talk about how he finds real estate agents and the pros and cons of actually using a real estate agent to market his property. Now, this show is brought to you by REI Conversion. If you are looking for a tool to help you manage the entire deal flow and to help you scale your land investing, make sure you check out REI Pebble. REI Pebble is a system that helps you save time when it comes to land investing. It really streamlines and simplifies the whole process. And we do that in a few ways through automation, by streamlining the entire process and making Pebble your one source of truth for your entire data so you're not going over to so many different systems to run your land business. Everything sits in the cloud on your account. You can access that from anywhere and run your land investing business from anywhere. Make sure you book a free demo with me at reiconversion.com/pebble. Just hit the book a tour button, find a time that works for you, and I'll jump on a call and show you how easy it is to grow and run your land investing business. All right, sit back, get a pen and paper ready, and we're going to dive deep with Jaren on selling land through a real estate agent. Hey, how's it going? It's Jesse here from the REI Conversion Podcast. I have a special guest here with me today, Jaren from REtipster. Jaren, how's it going?
It's good, man. It's an honor and pleasure if I can learn how to speak properly today. It's a pleasure to be here, man. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Jaren, I mentioned this last time. So you were on one of our Pebble Mastermind meetups and you spoke there. And I mentioned to you before that I knew you from like Simple Wholesaling. And I think it was either from podcasts or something. So can you share with us a little bit about your history in real estate and how you got into land investing?
Yeah. So do you want the Cliff Notes version or the quasi-long version?
How about a happy medium?
Happy medium. All right. So I got my start in real estate by having a bunch of friends buying into a guru program. I won't mention which guru program it was,
Sure.
But they convinced me to quit my stable job in insurance. I had just convinced the guy to hire me without a college degree, and it was like a salaried position. I was newly married, and my friends convinced me to quit my job and go door knock full time. They were saying that in one deal in the Bay Area where I was living at the time, I could make $100,000. And I was like, well, that's more money than I'm making a year. So heck yeah, I'm in. And so I quit my job after like a month and a half and went door knocking full time. I got like 6 properties under contract within the first, 10 properties under contract within the first 6 months of me doing that, but I didn't get paid anything because then, long story short, we ended up working with a company that was pretty unethical and we're doing some pretty shady stuff that I was ignorant to because I was brand new to the industry. And while there, I started a blog called Real Estate Catalyst, and I was documenting my journey into the world of real estate investing. I wrote a review about Bigger Pockets, and somehow Josh and Brandon actually saw it and like commented on it. And then I saw kind of just watching the Bigger Pockets community online that they were coming to the Bay Area. So I connected them with the guy that runs the Bigger Pockets meetups, and then helped them do a meet and greet, kind of got on their radar. Found out that they were hiring, but Josh wanted to hire somebody local to Denver. I didn't want to move to Denver. Josh didn't want another virtual employee like Brandon. So I ended up working for them, but it was going into it, it was known that it was going to be a temporary fill until they could find somebody local, and then I would train them up and then kind of move on from there. So I worked for Bigger Pockets, learned a ton of stuff. A ton of stuff. I was like, my job title was support admin, quote unquote, but I onboarded all of the podcast guests. I did the show notes. I did the show outlines. I edited the entire blog. So like 35 plus contributors, weekly and bi-weekly contributors, like just did a lot, and was exposed to a lot of what's out there in real estate. From there, I felt like I was kind of at a crossroads where it was like, okay, I either have to pick real estate or I have to pick content marketing. Most likely, I'm not going to be able to find a career in both. I ended up moving from the Bay Area and moved to Indianapolis because I had a friend that was living there, and he was saying it's amazing, and California was really expensive, and if I wanted to actually own a house, I needed to get out of there. So I ended up moving, and I decided to choose real estate. I got my real estate license, and but I was trying to like do like investor friendly agent kind of thing. And I reached out to somebody that was recommended by the Bigger Pockets community. Actually, I think I asked Brandon, like, hey, who's in Indy that's like super active and I should reach out to? And so he mentioned, he sent me into the direction of a guy. I met up with him. He connected me with his mentor, whose name is Brett Snodgrass. He at the time was starting something called Simple Wholesaling. He was a one man show or one stop shop wholesaler for like 9 years, and he wanted to like grow a team and like brand and scale. And so I met with him for coffee, and he ended up hiring me to do content marketing stuff. It was kind of crazy because I was like, oh, there's no way I can do both. But my entire career has kind of been this intersection of like content marketing and real estate investing.
Yeah.
So I helped him start a podcast, helped him brand a bunch of stuff. And then halfway through my time at Simple Wholesaling, we kind of had a shift in direction, and we're like, hey, we want to just really double down on the deal side. So I switched my role. I still like helped, do some branding stuff. Like I was the co-host of the podcast or whatever, but I became the disposition manager. So I was responsible for selling 25 to 35 properties per month. It was a wholesale operation, obviously Simple Wholesaling. And I learned a ton there. I thought I was going to be there for forever and ever, but there was kind of some change in direction. And at the time, I was probably, 6 to 8 months within doing land on the side. I had gotten into the land business because we interviewed a bunch of land guys, Jack Bosch and I think Mark Podolsky and Seth I knew from Simple Wholesaling. Seth I knew from my Bigger Pockets days.
Right.
And I was in a mastermind group with him and stuff. And he ended up letting me moonlight his course for a review. So not like a review for online for the public to see, but like a kind of internal review, like, hey, how could you make this 10 times better? So I gave him a huge thorough review. And then from there, because I had the content available, I hit the ground running and started my land business. And then from there, I transitioned out of Simple Wholesaling into land full-time. And then from being in land full-time and having the experience and background that I do, Seth and I saw that it was a really awesome opportunity for me to come and kind of merge our alliance and have me come and work for REtipster. So I've been here for, I think, like almost over 2 years now.
2 years, yeah, I think so.
Yeah. It's been pretty intense. So it's been a dream situation. I mean, I pinch myself, man. The stuff that I get to do every day is just super awesome. So my full-time gig is working with Seth at REtipster, but I run a land business on the side and do a bunch of real estate stuff on the side as well.
Yeah, that is quite the story. Yeah. I didn't know the whole working for insurance and quitting to do knock on door to door. That's awesome. Yeah, I'm sure you learned a lot with those kind of lessons.
Yeah, I mean, it was. I feel like everybody should, in some capacity, do some kind of door-to-door sales because that or cold calling. Because even if you do it for 3 months, you learn so much about yourself, so much about handling rejection. It's really, really good to go through that extremely painful process.
It is. Well, I brought you on the show to really talk about how you market your properties, and you actually sell your properties through a real estate agent rather than the traditional flipping method that a lot of land investors go and sort of market their own properties. So before we sort of dive into that, can you tell us a little bit about selling through a real estate agent and why you decide to go that route?
Yeah, really, it's because of time. So because I work a full-time job and that's pretty demanding. I mean, we have content schedules and other things that are happening here at REtipster.
Yeah.
And so I had to figure out a way to keep my land business pursuits active while still kind of like having time to do my job, right? And my wife was involved pretty heavily in the beginning, but now we have 2 kids and she's pretty busy as well, doing a much more important job, taking care of the
Pretty
home.
busy is an understatement.
Yeah, for sure. And so she actually was the one, I got to give credit where credit's due. She was the one that really tested out this strategy and figured it out, because everybody at the time in the land community was like, never work with a real estate agent. They're a waste of time. They're terrible. They'll just take your listing and not do anything with it and all that. And so that was kind of the mantra. And I was telling her, you're crazy. This isn't going to work. But she found a land specialized real estate agent that knew what he was doing. And he sold our property within I think like 2 months. And I was like, okay, well, that was really easy. All I did was get a deal, pass it to him. Yeah, I had to pay him a commission, but I still walked away with a great spread, and I didn't do anything. So that's kind of where it started. And since it worked, we were like, all right, pivot. And we just completely 100% went into this strategy. And there's pros and cons to it. There's risks involved and all of that, just like with everything. But for us, we feel like the pros far outweigh the cons for our situation. So now we exclusively sell through agents.
Yeah. And I think that's a decision that, that you have to make on your own and not sort of get influenced by what others are saying. Now, coming back to, I know you sort of have an organized way about finding land agents now, land real estate agents, but how did your wife find it? What did she do? What sort of path? She obviously navigated that all herself and figured it out.
So I think how it happened was we had a property that was on Facebook Marketplace for sale. And there was one of the leads that reached out to us was actually an agent representing somebody. And I think that's how the conversation got started. And that planted the seed of like, wait a second, this is an agent that has a buyer. Why don't we just go find an agent? And so at first it was a lot of trial and error and just like calling up random people. And, there were a couple times where we signed listing agreements with agents that were not good. And so we had to really figure out kind of a systematic approach to it. And really what it boils down to is she looks for really good pictures on Zillow. So like there's actually a pretty systematic way. Thank goodness for Zillow. It makes our job way easier. So you can go to Zillow, and if you look at land listings that have really good pictures of the property, so not aerial map snapshots, that's like an indicator that that's a bad agent or a real estate investor, a land flipper. And so people that actually go to the property, maybe get drone footage or, drone shots or like really nice pictures, and then really thorough descriptions. That's kind of like the first tier of filtering criteria, because there's most bad agents, they'll have like one picture and like a 2-sentence description. And then they just like, and then you'll see the days on market are like 593. It's like terrible. So you want to shy away from that completely. Like you really want to make sure that they have good pictures and good descriptions. And then you can do something on Zillow where every agent has an agent profile. And there's actually a section on Zillow where you can actually search the agent profiles like exclusively. Like you can just go there and type in agents in this area and look at them. But if you look at based on the listing, well, they already have a land listing. So that's an indicator that maybe they do a lot of land stuff. Then you can look at their agent profile and then look at their past sales. So there's like sold properties, and then you can just look at the ratio of land properties to other types of real estate. And if the majority of their listings are land or rural property, then there you go. It's clear that they've done a bunch of stuff in the past. And then at that point, I would call them and then vet them out and say, hey, I'm a land investor. This is what I do. See if they understand what I'm doing and see if they understand the opportunity of working with me, who can, somebody who can give them repeat business. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes their mindset is just kind of retail and they don't understand, like, how are you getting discounted properties? What is this? And I just don't work with those people. I just want to work with somebody who really gets where I'm coming from and who I am and can be a great partner essentially to work with for the long run. And at retipster.com/land agents. I did a whole blog post that like takes you step by step with videos. Like literally I have a updated video on there where I go to Zillow and I show you exactly how to do everything I just said. So
Oh, wow. Okay. So I was going
yeah.
to put this in the show notes here. Again, that's retipster.com/land agents. And you sort of break down how you sort of evaluate and find a land real estate agent then.
Yeah, we even have like a questionnaire that you can download. So like the actual questions that I ask the agents and all
That's
that.
amazing. That's
Yeah.
amazing. And that's the great thing about you guys at REtipster. I know your guys' blog is super thorough, very value driven. So I'm sure you just that one podcast. Sorry, one blog post is going to, I'm sure, be very helpful. Now, let me ask you this: when you're working with an agent, how are you guys sort of splitting the payment? And what happens, with the commission, and what happens if you are the one who sold it? How does this all sort of work out for you guys?
So there's a couple of ways you can go about it. So the very first part of that question, most land agents get 10% commission. So that's like kind of the standard in the industry. Normally they represent both sides though. Like I can't even remember a time where, I'm sure it's happened, but I can't even remember a time where an agent that represented me didn't also represent the buyer. So, typically in a real estate, conventional real estate situation, you're paying 6% as the seller. 3.5% goes to one agent, and then 3.5% goes to another, which I guess comes out to like 7%, or whatever. But yeah. Yeah. So typically it's like 6% roughly for retail stuff. When you work with a land agent, you can negotiate it down if you give a lot of business to them. So, normally we do, normally they start off at 10%. And then after a few deals together, I'll say, hey, since we're doing so much business together, do you mind dropping your commission to 6%? And 9 times out of 10, they say, yeah. And if they don't, and if they're a good agent, I'll just pay the 10% and not worry about it. But more often than not, I'm paying about 6% after our relationship is established. The second part about your question was
basically, what if you're the one who sold it?
Right.
So how does that work out? They didn't do any work. You're the one who found the buyer.
Yeah. So what you can do in that situation is you can have like a limited type of agreement with them where you pretty much say, hey, if you bring the buyer, then I'll pay you the commission. If I bring the buyer, I don't pay you the commission, or I just pay you part of the commission, or what have you, because you got to just figure out how much work they're putting in into the property. Like a lot of my agents will run due diligence for me and walk the property and take pictures and do a bunch of stuff. So, it kind of depends on the situation, but I know for sure you can structure it in a way. All this is negotiable. So right. You can structure it in a way that makes sense for both parties. If you want to, you can hardball them and say, hey, you bring me a buyer, I'll pay you a commission. If you don't bring me a buyer from my network, or my activity brings me a buyer, then I'm not going to pay you anything. And depending on the agent, they might agree to that. Especially if they have buyers chomping at the bits in areas that you do business in. So it all really depends how you can structure it. I always go through agents. So there have been times in the beginning when I was transitioning from listings on Facebook Marketplace and Zillow and Craigslist, where if I got a lead, what I would do is I would just send it to the agent and have the agent service it so they justified their commission. And that's how I did it. But I know some guys, they might have years of work in building a buyer's list and, all kind of stuff. And it doesn't really make sense to use an agent because they're afraid that they'll be stuck to using them. Now, be forewarned though, a typical listing agreement, there's like a exclusivity clause a lot of the times that the agents will shoot for, and be careful not to sign that, because if you sign that, then like legally, whenever you sell the property, you have to pay a commission to this agent.
Right. Okay.
So avoid that at all costs if you don't plan on doing so.
Now, if an investor wants to do, their own marketing, and maybe some properties they're going to consider using a real estate agent, is that, in what situation would they sort of say, okay, this kind of property is better for using a real estate agent, or yeah, when would it be a good time for someone to start considering a real estate agent if, for whatever reason, maybe they don't have as much time or whatever it may be?
I think really a big factor is price. Like, are you playing in a sandbox that has a large enough margin in order to pay for an agent? Because most of the time agents want to go through title companies. So if you self close, that's going to be another added expense. Like, most likely you're going to have to go through a title company. You have to pay a commission. So if you're buying a property for $500 and selling it for $1,200, it's probably not going to work. If you're buying a property of $5,000 or $10,000 and selling it for 15 to 20, there are tons of agents, at least in Florida, that are happy to make $500 to $1,000 commissions. So in their business model is high volume. So that's what that's the name of the game for them. So they're not afraid of $500 commissions here and there. So I think that's the biggest factor. I think too, terms, if terms is a big part of your business,
Right.
Then it can be challenging working with an agent. Now, there are some agents out there that will work with you if they're savvy, they're investor friendly, they understand the game, they understand selling on terms. They might even have buyers that are looking for property on terms, but you just have to figure out how to get them paid. So are you going to be paying them the entire down payment? Is the down payment large enough to pay them a commission? What does it look like? So you just kind of have to figure out almost on a property by property basis, if you do terms, what's going to be the best way to keep them happy.
Right. Okay. And do you sort of have in your head sort of the pros and cons of working with a real estate agent? Time is obviously a huge pro here. And obviously the other one is the con to this is, that they eat into your margins. But any other pros and cons that most may not consider or should consider if they are looking into this route?
Yeah, probably the biggest value that agents bring to me, honestly, is due diligence. Because when I'm doing, I live in Northwest Indiana and I flip land in Florida, and I'm not looking at these properties. I'm just doing everything that I can do with my, phone and an internet connection. And there are things that you're just going to miss without laying eyes on the property. But I always have eyes on the property before I buy because I work with agents. So
they're also part of your acquisition process then.
Yeah. So like I was just texting my agent this morning on a deal that came in Putnam County, Florida. And I was like, hey, what do you think about this property? And I run my numbers and I'm like, I think I could be around here, but then I have somebody who's an active expert in land in my market that can tell me numbers. So he's like, yeah, we can sell it between 16 and 18K. And I'm like, okay, that's awesome. And what that means, because this is the agent that I've worked with the most, what that means is worst case scenario, we'll sell it for 16. Best case scenario, we'll sell it for 18. So I can take that 16 number and then reverse engineer it and say, okay, well, I would be in the property for $8,000 and, I'd have to pay out this and this and that. Would it make sense for me to pull the trigger, or do I have to renegotiate or whatever? So that's a huge element, because a lot of people, they feel like comps are unreliable in the land business. And I think depending on what market you're in, they definitely can be. Indiana was pretty tough on comps, even working with agents, because I was working with a Mossy Oak agent here in Northwest Indiana, in Southern Indiana when I was living in Indianapolis. And a lot of times they would pull comps from the MLS and they'd be like, I don't really know. And it depends on the market. But if you're in a market like Florida, where there's a lot of activity, comps are really a dime a dozen.
Right.
So that's a big aspect. And then the due diligence side of them walking the property. In Florida, there's weird situations where you might look up a property in the wetlands mapper and it doesn't show that it's in wetlands, but then there's cypress trees on the property. And if there's cypress trees on the property, it pretty much is wetland property. It's just not registered as wetlands. And so it's really tough to sell. So having my agent who knows what to look for and specializes in that stuff, it's amazing, because he walks the property and he's like, yep, we can sell it. It's awesome. Or I want to touch that property. I can't tell you how many properties my agents have saved me from buying. It's just been awesome. So that's the, I think, the biggest pro. When it comes to cons, I think the biggest thing is price, and then in some capacity time. So like it's it definitely releases a lot of like tension from like a bottleneck perspective in my business on my side. But in terms of moving property, I sell property within 3 to 6 months. So probably on average like 4.5 months roughly per property. A lot of other guys who, after they've built a solid buyers list and have a really active community, they can sell properties daily. They can sell properties weekly. I'm not doing that. So I have to deal with a kind of a longer timeline, but
Right.
it's a hands-off timeline. So that's
Right.
another negative. And then like I mentioned about the figuring out the term stuff. If terms is a big portion of your business, you kind of have to figure out case by case what to do and how to pay them if you want to use them to sell term deals.
So it really, again, depends on, how you're going to run your business, what your goals are, and how much time you have really affects if you should go and check out this route or not, I
Yep,
guess. I would
100%.
imagine also marketing with an agent also, there's massive, people tend to trust, I guess, agents more than they would, an investor who's trying to self-close. I mean, they're going to be using a title company. There's just a lot of added value along the way as well, I imagine, that
Yeah,
makes it
when
easy
I
to offload a property.
tried to sell property through Facebook Marketplaces, I sold some, but something I kept running into over and over again is like, how do I know you're not a scammer?
Yeah, right.
Why, you don't want to meet with me in person? This is weird, And I never have to deal with that because my agent's meeting them in person,
Right,
you know?
right, right, right. Yeah, exactly. Um, Thanks again for sharing so much here on this show about investing with real estate agents. Is there anything I missed out that I didn't ask about working with real estate agents in general? We sort of talked the pros and cons and why you do it. We talked about sort of structuring the payment and how you sort of have things. Actually, I have another question here for you: is how
Yeah.
can you support your real estate agent? What are you doing to sort of make their life easier to get that property off their hands and that typical real estate investors wouldn't know about?
I think doing a large portion of kind of the underwriting on my side before I bring it to them. So like I'm only going to bring a lead to their attention if it's pretty solid. So I'm not going to waste their time going to a property or underwriting a property unless there's like at least probably a 70% chance that deal's coming through.
Right.
So that's something that you got to be mindful of. They're busy. They have other buyers too. And if you want to keep them happy, like don't bombard them with a bunch of stuff. And make sure that they know you're serious, especially in the beginning, because there's flakes out there, and people, if they think that you're a flake, they're just not going to give you the time of day, especially if they're good. So just be mindful of their time and, just be intentional in your communication with them, be prompt. And you expect that too from them. Like,
Right.
understand they shouldn't be wasting your time, and they should be prompt. Like I text my agent yesterday, and within a 24-hour period, like he has comps for me. Normally it's faster, but he was in like closings and stuff. But like
Right.
that's awesome. If it's like 2 days or 3 days, or I constantly have to text him to get the stuff, I don't want to work with that guy.
Right.
The only other thing I think we didn't talk about is closing costs. So typically, if you're buying a property through a title company or self-closing, like, you're paying all closing costs, right? And then a lot of the times you can offset those closing costs by having having the buyer pay for all the closing costs if you go through a title company or what have you, or factoring it in the terms or whatever. Normally I've found that you get a lot of pushback when you try to shoot for that working with an agent, because the cultural norm, I guess, of doing closings is that you split closing costs. So if you run into that kind of pushback, like it kind of comes with the territory, you can still fight for it, especially if you're dealing with somebody that you have a lot of relational capital with. But because especially if they're representing both sides, it puts them in a weird spot. If they're like, yeah, you should, buyer, you should pay all closing costs. So I typically split closing costs and just don't rock the boat.
What about if you're just not happy with the agent? I mean, should you guys come up with an agreement of how long you should be working together for before, saying, hey, this is it? Is there sort of a period of time where you're kind of testing out the waters, and how can you sort of structure that into your agreement?
Yeah, so it depends if you're going to be signing an exclusivity agreement with them where you're always going to be selling through them. If you do that, if you've never done a deal with them before, I would limit that to 3 months in the contract. Normally they're 6 months, but I would limit it to 3 months because that will let them know, hey, I'm putting good faith in you, but I really want to make sure that you're legit. And if they give you pushback on that, that would be a red flag for me. I'd be like, well, hey, I've never done a deal with you. Like, why are you planning on dilly-dallying? Like, why would we need 6 months? And because the reality is if they're doing good and then 3 months comes, then you can just re-sign with them. And like, it's not a big deal. So you shouldn't be getting any kind of pushback, but I typically do 6 months now with agents that I have relationships with. But if I don't have one, if it's brand new, then I'm shooting for 3 months.
Gotcha.
Now, if it's the other side where it's kind of like that worked out agreement where it's like, hey, if I bring in my own buyer, I don't pay you anything, or I just pay you partial, then that's all negotiable.
Right. Gotcha. I want to sort of take this last question on a totally different angle here. Jaren, you've obviously carved out your dream career here. You're an entrepreneur, and you've sort of built your own path here. And it's the beginning of the year here. And do you have sort of any lessons or advice in general when it comes to running a business that you can share with us?
I do, actually. And I wrote a blog post about it at REtipster. So retipster.com/profit-first-overview. I did a review on this book called Profit First. And when I first started my land business, it was weird because I was growing. I was doing more and more volume, but I wasn't making much more money. Like my lifestyle wasn't really changing. Like it wasn't like a lot of money came into my bank account, but then a lot of money went right back out. And I think a lot of people struggle with the skill set of knowing how to manage business finance. There's a difference between knowing how to do your craft, right? Like I know how to do deals. Pretty much probably all of your listeners know how to buy and sell real estate, or in their process of learning and developing that skill. But there's another side to the coin of being successful in business in general, and real estate investing is no different. It's understanding how to set aside money for taxes, set aside money for operating expenses, for marketing. And I really like the Profit First framework because it, at least for me, works in the way that I think, in the way that I'm just kind of wired. So, they kind of make a traditional accounting the enemy. And like they say, traditional accountants define profit as profit is revenue minus expenses equals profit. And then they flip that, but Profit First flips that on its head and says, that's not true, because human psychology leaves the least important things last and places the most important things first. So it should be profit minus revenue minus profit equals expenses. And it's just a different way to look at your business. And if you put profit as your number one priority and you say, okay, I'm going to make money, I'm going to make a salary, and then I'm going to run my business with what's left over, it completely changes the game. And I feel like maybe because I come from the Bay Area, and kind of riding off the coattails of the startup culture, everybody and I just kind of assumed that the objective of starting a business was like growth at all costs. And then eventually one day when I grow a business to this huge thing, then I'll have like all the money in the world and I'll be super successful. And that works in the tech startup world because their objective is to grow a business really, really quickly and then sell it and then have a big payday. It's kind of like flipping a house. They're just flipping a business. Yeah. But that's not what small business owners should do. Small business owners, the objective, like their end game is to have their business actually like be the thing that provides them the lifestyle that they want. So you really should keep in mind, first things first, like this thing needs to make you money from day one. And he has a pretty healthy perspective on debt and a pretty healthy perspective. Like he's not like as strong as Dave Ramsey, where he's like, debt is evil, raw. He's like, if you're going to get into debt, what you use debt for should like be a pretty much sure thing to make you money. And as long as that's there, then you're pretty much good to go. So I'm a big fan, a big advocate. That book really helped me understand, oh, okay, like there's a spot for me to take money as my number one employee and take a salary. And then there's money set aside as a business owner called profit. And I should set money aside or reimburse myself for direct mail costs. Like I never did that. I just be like, hey, there's money in the account. I need money. I'm taking it. Or, oh, it's time to do the next direct mail campaign. And then if there wasn't money in the account, I'd freak out and try to like sell property, put pressure on my agents and all that. So that's not a way to live. That's like super stressful and like not good. So if you guys are in that situation, I would highly recommend Profit First. And then there's a friend of mine who's actually like a certified Profit First like coach, and he's actually like writing the book for Profit First for real estate investors. So if you guys look at like Profit First for REI.com or whatever, you can go check that out. Once that book is written, I'm sure it's going to be like exceptional, and because there's some nuances that you want to adjust for real estate from the original book, but it's just at a high level, framework principle level, it's phenomenal. So I hope that somebody gets their life changed by that. I really wish that somebody told me about this book a long time ago.
Well, thanks for sharing that. And they can find that over at retipster.com/profit-first-overview. And I'll share that in the show notes. Jaren, last of all, I just, I whenever somebody asks me about land and they need help, I actually love suggesting you. And you also do a little bit of coaching. So if anybody wants to work with Jaren, how can they work? What does working with you look like, and how can they get a hold of you?
Yeah, so we offer coaching at REtipster. It's on the website. I don't know the direct URL underneath education, but here's the thing. Most guys try to upsell their coaching from their course, but at REtipster, we kind of did like the opposite. It's like we put everything that you need to get started in the course. So the course is kind of the name of the game. That's what I used to get started in real estate, or sorry, not in real estate, but in land investing. And that's really everything and like soup to nuts, everything you need about the land investing world, like you can get it in that course. Where coaching comes in though, is there are a lot of people that wanted that one-on-one kind of oversight to walk them step by step through the process. And so that's what you get with coaching. If you work with me at REtipster in our coaching program, you get access to the course. So like the price is like $6,500 to work with me. And it includes like 13 sessions, but it also includes a lifetime membership to the REtipster Land Masterclass. So you get that. And really what it does is it gives you direct access to me. So I add you to a Slack channel that is literally on my cell phone. And like we can text at 2:00 in the morning if you want. I might be sleeping, but if you need me, I try to be available as much as I can. And the first 10 sessions literally walks you through picking a market, and then it builds on itself. So it's like picking a market, setting up your infrastructure, doing direct mail. So the objective is really like get from no deals to deals.
Right.
And so and it's not really the greatest fit for people who've already done deals. I've worked with people in the past who've done deals, and the value just really wasn't as strong for them because a lot of it was overview. So now if people have like one area or two areas that they're just fuzzy on, then I kind of offer like a one-time session fee or whatever. And then we just do a deep dive on that one topic. But if you're brand new and you want to get from no deal to one deal, then I think it's a pretty cool program. Because if you do Florida, like you can leverage my agents. I'll like literally give you my agents and say, hey, here's my title company. Here's this, here's that. So that's where it's kind of the hands-on rubber meets the road kind of accountability. So that's really the name of the game. But I want to reemphasize, like, you definitely don't need the coaching. Like the course is all you need. for sure.
And I went through the course. That's the land course that I went through. It was an awesome program. I know Kevin, who's also the co-founder here, he also did coaching with you and went through the course as well. So we both found it very helpful. And thank you both for all that you guys are doing with your blog, with your courses, with all the different things that you guys are trying out. And one of the things that I love that you do, Jaren, is you experiment a lot. Like you're just a really creative person.
Oh, thanks, man.
Yeah, I don't know. It's really inspiring to see that. Yeah, you just go out and try it. And I know Seth is the same way. You guys try a lot of different things, and it shows in your work. And yeah, we really appreciate it in the whole land investing community. So thank you on behalf of everybody.
Yeah, man, thanks.
Jaren, thanks again for coming on the show. And also thanks for coming on the Pebble Mastermind as well. Again, if you guys want to get a hold of Jaren, you can find him on the blog. You can email him directly. Is it okay if I give your email to Jaren at REtipster.com? You can always email us. I can always connect you guys as well. But make sure you check out the show notes. We have the links there. Jaren, once again, thank you very much. And I hope to have you guys back on the show again.
Yeah, man, it was a pleasure. I'm not committing here to anything, but you might catch me in the tribe community that you guys got going on. I want to join that and be an active member in your guys' community as well. So no guarantees. I'm a pretty busy guy, but as I'm able, I want to be active in your community as well.
Awesome. Thanks very much, Jaren. We'll talk to you soon. Before you stop this podcast or head to the next episode, I want to personally thank you for listening to this episode of the REI Conversion Podcast. If you found this helpful, we'd greatly appreciate an awesome review and rating on whichever platform you're listening to this on. And if you have 2 minutes and wanted to step it up even more and help others, feel free to share this in other Facebook groups or pages or any communities, giving others a heads up of the REI Conversion Podcast or this specific episode that may help them on their investing journey. Once again, thanks very much for listening, and catch you on our next episode.